Hi, JJ. Welcome to a conversation with Kat.
Hello, conversation with Kat. How are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm good. Yet again, I'm going to try and give you a big virtual hug and say,
Oh, yay. Thank you so much. I love hugs. I miss them so much.
yeah, well, hopefully that's something that we'll be having lots more of imminently.
Yeah.
So we caught up in March last time in person, which was,
Yes.
yeah, wonderful and awesome. And we got to sort of probe deep concepts like diversity and inclusion and International Women's Day.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was a really robust conversation and lots of people tuned in, and we made some promises that we'd get back together at the end of the year and continue the thematic. So here we are.
Here we are. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. Thinking about the big topic of inclusion, how do
Yeah.
you think the last 6 months has impacted in the, inclusion in the workplace? Do you think we've gone forward or backwards or stayed about the same?
For me, I would have to say that with all the people that I touch on Zoom, because all business is really done over Zoom or Teams or some other form like that. I think if you use it well, you can learn a lot about people, but I'm not sure that most people are using it in that way. So
Mm,
I'd actually vote for going a little bit backwards.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
I think you're quite right too. What I'm seeing is that people say there's been a lot more authenticity because we're connecting with each other, into our rooms and our bedrooms and we're seeing life. But at the same time, I see this real unauthenticity as everyone turns up happy, happy on camera and goes off camera and who knows what. And we know people are melting down and being sad and, lonely and isolated. But on camera, it's all, hi, how are you? So,
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, you can also look at how much anxiety and depression and mental health has actually gone up throughout this,
mm.
and if you take that and you correlate that with diversity and inclusion, I think that even if they said it was doing better, you'd actually find out it's probably not exactly the same. I'll tell you my favorite thing about Zoom meetings though is getting like the real tough guys to wave at me goodbye. I think that's so much fun, whether they're in a good mood or not. I just find it fun to go, bye, right? Or bye.
Yeah, bye, exactly. I do think we've come some way in being more human, which is a good thing. If you think back to what would it be 2, 3 years ago when we had that infamous BBC clip where the male presenter was doing the very serious, presentation on a hardcore business topic, and the kids came in, and his, wife sort of creeped around and pulled the kids out of the background. Now she'd just swagger in and just be like, "Come on, kids, get out of here."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I honestly, I don't think that connection has been the biggest problem that's come out of this. I think we actually have shown our human side in that we've shown a lot more fear. Fear has been the biggest sickness that I think I've seen come out of all of this.
Mm,
People are turning a blind eye to a lot of things and being accepting of answers handed to them and not only because they're afraid.
mm.
So, yeah, again, if I take that and I take mental health and I correlate that against diversity and inclusion, I don't actually see it as, a plus.
Mm, mm. So we started off by interrogating the idea of equality, and specifically in, on IWD, we talk a lot about gender equality. But, one of the topics we talked about is how many people get left out of a gender equality debate. So I'd love to go back to the beginning
Yeah.
and and sit with you and say, what do you think of when you hear the word equality? What does it spark in you?
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question, and it's a very strange question. So,
Yeah,
what's
bring it
your
on.
what's your favorite ice cream?
You know what? I don't really like ice cream. I'm a very quirky person. So if I do have one, I'll go for like a chocolate sorbet.
Oh, there you go. So chocolate sorbet. So any other kind of flavors that you like?
I'd do coffee because it kind of reminds me of a coffee.
Yeah, right. Okay. So then here's my definition of equality, the way that we serve it up. It's vanilla ice cream, right? And so What I mean by that is you like coffee or you like the mocha or chocolate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Ben and Jerry's
Oh,
fanatic, right? So I think that equality really actually has to have two parts to it. I think there's one where you've got the larger focus. And then you also have to have a personal focus. And when I'm working with companies, what I actually tell them is, look, if you take the word equality, the majority of that word is quality.
mm,
Right? So now if I take the word quality and I take the E from up front and I put it behind, now I can start to look at the things where I need the highest levels of quality, right? So
mm,
education, employment, environment, economics, our engagements. And when you actually look at it from that perspective, you actually see that that's not what the word equality is being used for. Right
mm,
now, it's got an oppressor and an oppressed. And so, the oppressed are leaning
mm-hmm.
on the oppressor to be the oppressor, and the oppressing are actually pointing at something outside of them. And I don't think that equation or how we use equality currently gets you any of those E factors, right?
Mm,
It doesn't
mm,
improve any of those. But then there's a second part of equality, right? If I keep the word quality and I start looking at it from a personal perspective, well, then I look at it and I go, well, what am I really getting out of being for feminism or this or
mm,
that? Or what am I really getting out of it? Because, when the group gets what they want, a lot of times they come to everybody who's been supporting them and go, we got the vanilla ice cream,
yeah, yet
and
again.
people are sitting there going, I asked for chocolate mint,
Yeah.
right? And so you always have to keep a part of equality is your responsibility. It's
Mm,
for you to remember that you've got the ability to make decisions. You have to look at your self-worth and your aims. If you're supporting a big group, you have to look at your battles when you're talking about equality. And so if you're growing and you're doing better and you teach other people that are in that same battle for equality what you're doing to get growth, well, then what you're teaching people is how to get chocolate syrup or
mm,
sprinkles on top of the vanilla ice cream. And it's a stupid analogy, but if you think about it, if the group wins and they only got vanilla, you'd be pretty disappointed. And I
mm,
think that that's what equality is actually doing.
mm,
Because if this place is serving vanilla ice cream, we'd go find a different place that was serving the kind of ice cream that we wanted. And so when you look at equality, you always have to keep yourself in mind. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to forget that. And
mm,
so even if you got equality, you didn't get equality.
mm, mm.
That's how I look at it. And can I tell you why I say this?
Yeah, please.
It has nothing to do with, just looking at the outside world. I came through a gender transition, and it's almost 7 years ago that happened. And when I stepped over the line and I started looking at it, I started pointing fingers. Oh, look what they're doing. Oh, how dare you say that, right? I'm a transgender activist. And I started doing all this stuff and pointing fingers. But that old saying, one finger pointing out, three fingers pointing back, I started going, wait a minute,
Yeah.
how am I treating other people?
Mm,
You know, I actually picked up the phone and called some of my EAs because, I had been a CEO at several companies. I picked up the phone after I started to realize what a jerk I was being, after I transitioned. I thought, wow, I wonder how many times I treated others like that. And
mm,
so I picked up, and called some of the EAs and said, I'm really sorry, you
mm,
know,
mm.
and so I think that that's why I started looking at it and going, wait a minute, where's the personal responsibility? You want your rights. And so you don't get to have one without the other, in my belief.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. I mean, what I look at is I see a lot of yelling for rights, and I've got a lot of sympathy for a lot of areas where people are not getting their full rights met. They're underpayment, bad treatment, harassment and bullying. But when it becomes solely a rights-based argument, it becomes very weaponized.
Oh, it
And
does.
Yeah, and it's extreme and it's hostile, and it goes right against everything that we're talking about. And I think you're quite right that what is missing is you can even ask for a right or yell for a right, but where is the responsibility and the accountability?
Well, I think there's a small addendum to that, and that's this. You don't get to get your rights met
Mm,
by stepping on somebody else's rights
yeah,
either.
yeah,
And I find that to be atrocious. I find that appalling, you
yeah.
know. And I've been called a trans contrarian before and transphobic even because I don't agree with the transgender agenda.
Mm,
We shouldn't be playing, we, including me, should not be playing in women's sports as an example. I
mm,
think that that steps on a woman's right. And I think that it actually tarnishes
mm,
and takes away from a woman being unique into herself.
mm,
Um, so I think that you have to still keep that rights connected to responsibility.
mm,
And if you don't like what's going on there, you can challenge it, right?
mm,
But like you're
mm.
saying, not in a weaponized way. And this is the thing that most people won't do, they'll sit and bitch,
Yeah,
but they won't actually leave and go find a better environment, a better education, better economics, better people to engage with, take that responsibility and go find your place.
yeah, yeah. And I love your ice cream analogy describe it or enhances this so much for me because I don't like the current women's debate. I don't like the way it's women versus men in many ways. So a bit like you're saying there are elements of the transgender debate you're not in love with. I'm not loving bits of the women's bit. And it's I feel as though I'm getting served vanilla over there. And I'm going, hang on, I'm not a vanilla woman. My culture is really important to me. All of these other aspects are really important to me. I want to be your choc mint chip with a bit of sprinkles. That's why it's not working for me. Like, don't shove this vanilla version down my throat.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes going for equality, what we try and do is similar to what we do in diversity and inclusion, right? You can be unique as long as you're actually fitting in. And it's like, sorry,
Yeah.
that just doesn't work.
Well, you've brought up one of my other dear topics to my heart. So, diversity and inclusion. So, that's been something that's been used for a long time in Australia now. I mean, I remember I had my first D&I manager job, so you had to manage those diverse people in an organization about 15 years ago. And here we are still talking about it. I mean, what's your take? Do you think diversity and inclusion as an approach for solving this issue has worked?
Well, if I look at what the corporates and even in the audiences that I end up talking to, if I look at what we typically define diversity as, we're only talking about people, which is
Mm,
about 1/8, if not 1/10 of what diversity should actually be a conversation about. And so when you look at it, it should really be a freedom of being,
mm,
be diversity, right? And inclusion should actually be a freedom of exchange. So what I put in and what I get out, right? And so that's to me, what inclusion should mean. We haven't fully defined diversity and inclusion. What we did was go, oh, that sounds good. And then certain groups of people claimed it, right?
mm,
So LGBTI women, right? But you don't see, any protests of elders, and you don't see protests of, people who are handicapped in any way, right?
mm,
Um, and I think what we've done with diversity and inclusion, it's been anything but diverse or inclusive. I think what we've actually done is said, hey, you're LGBTI, let's have more celebration days
mm.
for those, right? And I find that appalling. We step over women, we step over disabilities, we step over elderly, and we actually have
Mm,
shifted things around. Now, again, I'm a little outspoken, but I'm not talking out of turn here
mm,
because diversity and inclusion initially would have had an effect on me as well, but I don't have that group mentality. And
mm,
that's really what I see diversity trying to be. It's okay to be unique as long as you fit in.
mm,
So it's much more about conformity. Um,
mm.
I can tell you there's some things that I think diversity and inclusion are about if you want to talk about those. I think it's about inspiration, innovation, even
Yeah.
nanovation, right? Nanovation being the small projects that actually lead to the fulfillment of the larger innovation. And I really think it's about systems and solutions. We haven't diversified in those arenas. We'll say, yes, we've diversified into technology, but that doesn't mean that they're being used to create the diversity that you want.
Mm,
I also think that when you take and you make the entire story of diversity and inclusion about profit, you actually cut out a lot of people
yeah.
who really don't actually participate in the conversation about profitability of the business. They're just in a role. And so
Mm,
you leave a lot of those people on the sidelines. And I just don't see that as being inclusive.
mm,
Right. So yeah, inclusion to me is really an exchange, that input and output. And it's like I should know, and everyone in my group, I should be able to say, these are my skills, and we would know everyone's skills. I should be able to put mine in and know that those are contributing, how to actually even grow mine. And
mm.
then also have some other people whose skills in the group or knowledge or experience in the group could actually raise mine, and then I could actually be raising others. But you don't really have that kind of an exchange. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And you raised that even with the definition of equality when you brought education, environment, and economics into the conversation as well as employment. And so often that diversity and inclusion thinking is purely workplace, and it becomes this almost falsehood that be yourself at work, but in this sort of format of yourself. And when you go home, you can do whatever you want. But it's
100%. But that's
that.
not the way it works, because what diversity and inclusion in a business doesn't really take into account. And so we've started creating other words to actually make bridges, like corporate social responsibility and
Yeah.
allyship, right? Because we go, oh, wait a minute, we've got clients, we've got vendors, they've got
Hmm.
families. And the one group that we don't actually put everybody in. It doesn't have men in there. We don't actually include men in diversity and inclusion. It's like we say, well, you know what? Well, they know who they are. It's
Yeah.
just women and everyone else, right? That
Yeah.
we call diverse. And I don't think that I agree with that either. Um,
That's a bit that really gets me is all the people who are excluded from the diversity and inclusion discussion. It's just like if we can't see that that proves the problem with it, we've really got an issue. I remember I was running a listening session at a major corporate, and I asked the people in the room, what does diversity mean to you? And this lovely, intelligent woman said, oh, I'm not diverse, so I won't answer this question.
yeah,
What do you mean you're not diverse? She said, oh, well, I'm not from a different cultural background or
yeah.
anything like that. So I don't have diversity.
Well,
Whoa.
you know what? I can tell you, I've seen that so many times. I completely agree with you. So if you can picture a circle, this is what I started talking to businesses about. You've got 4 points on this diversity and inclusion circle where people sit. So you've got a point at the top and the bottom and each of the sides. So the point at the top is called disassociated.
Mm,
Right. And then the point at the bottom is called associated. The point to the left is called logic, and the point to the right is called emotion. So you're
mm,
either disassociated because of a logical reason, right?
yeah.
Something you believe is true. And so that's why I have to disassociate from that. I'm a middle-aged man and I'm straight, right? Or middle-aged woman and I'm straight. So that may cause me to say I'm disassociated, right?
Mm,
You're going to have disassociated and angry, which is
yeah.
where they may not actually like or approve of a diverse culture, right?
Mm,
Be it race, be it religion, be it whatever it happens to be. But then you look at the bottom and you've got associated for logical reasons, allyship, right?
yeah.
Corporate social responsibility. But a lot of times that leads to commercialism,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So, oh, you know what? We could really do well if we just say that we're a part of blank.
Yeah.
And then you've got associated emotional, and those are people who it's happening to. So which makes better decisions? Associated logical,
Mm,
associated emotional, disassociated logical, disassociated emotional? Which one makes better decisions? The answer is actually none.
yeah. Yeah.
But because what we have a tendency to do as human beings is we step on a point and we stay there. So,
Mm,
so what I teach businesses to do is take your people around to all 4 points and then ask them to make a decision. Because if I can actually see it from all 4 perspectives, I'm probably going to make a little bit different decision. Maybe not, but
yeah.
at least we made the attempt to open up the mind, right? But I'll bet, knowing human beings as I think I do, I think a higher percentage would actually be a lot more open if they were knowing people and knowing what diversity and inclusion was really about. It would feel more profound. It would feel more like an aim that they'd like to participate in because they get something back as
Mm.
well as something that they can contribute. And that's really what human beings want.
Absolutely. And I'm not aware of many people that would approach their D&I pathway with any sort of modeling of people about their engagement levels. They model who is diverse, who fits into a category, and they might have an ally category, but not the emotional connectivity or the logical connectivity. And so it's interesting, as we talked about before, why do D&I approaches not work or not get as much traction as people hope to? There's got to be something in that modeling of that 4-point compass that you just explained.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also got to be something that I feel like I want to participate in.
Mm,
It's got to have, we don't have many things in our world that are truthful or profound anymore that we want to participate in. And
mm,
so, that's why we get trapped in these ideas of equality and diversity and inclusion. And they sort of become mini religions.
mhm,
People
mhm.
hold on to them and they've got convictions about them, but they don't really have beliefs about them, just a conviction because that's what you're supposed to do. And it doesn't make it good. It doesn't make it work for everyone and on any day,
Mm,
right? Which is what you strive to do for your clients.
yeah,
So it just, if we had, I think, a little bit more diverse thinking. And what I mean by diverse thinking is, we were truly looking at how could someone's, preference in their relationships or the way that they want to be, what did they learn from that becomes, usable for them in business? So, and a lot of people, I mean, I'm a very deep thinker in the first place, but I know a lot of people who've been through transition who, when they say, so what was your biggest change going through
yeah.
transition? What did you really get out of it? I said, oh, I got patience. I got forgiveness. I
Mm,
got truly understanding what love means, right? And when I understood those things, I mean, they really changed my life.
yeah.
And that was my experience. But if you asked 100 trans people that same question, you wouldn't get those 3 answers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, some of them got lipstick. I jest, obviously, but can I tell you the best description or example of diversity and inclusion that I've actually ever seen, and probably one of the masters of it, and he doesn't even know he is.
Yeah.
But I did some work early on in my marketing and advertising career, and I got to work with the Chicago Bulls. And Phil Jackson and the early Chicago Bulls is a magnificent example of how to take some of the most untamed beasts, creatures of their own making and of their own kind. Take all these incredible, unique people and bring them together to create a team, not once,
Yeah.
but several times, to make them a very winning team. And he would say to them,
Mm,
there's no such thing as a championship group. So you
mm,
better figure it out. And
mm,
they did exactly what we were talking about. They had that balance of learning from each other, but they got to stay uniquely themselves. Now, and
mm.
I brought up this one time, and this woman says to me, she goes, you know what, that's one person doing it one time. That's not something that's duplicable. I said, okay, Phil Jackson, LA Lakers, ta-da, same.
Mhm.
That's why the guy's got 11 rings. Why? Not just because he understands sports, but he brought in ways to show them how to improve themselves, how to be better, how to
Mm,
make the game better, right?
mm.
And also how to learn from each other and how to have each other's back. See, now diversity and inclusion had those aims, right, as a necessity, not just as a feel
Absolutely.
good. I
Yeah,
think it's pretty amazing.
yeah. And there was that comment around he really gets sport, but all I heard was he really gets people, you
Oh
know,
my gosh,
and
yeah.
he's applied it in a sport context. Now imagine if, a diversity and inclusion approach started from a really people-centric
Yeah.
place.
I wish more people would read his book, 11 Rings. They would have some incredible insights, or just go watch the on Netflix, just go watch
The
the
show,
whole
yeah.
story. Yeah. And it really shows you see them fighting,
Yep.
right? Battling, swearing at each other, angry at times, but always a team. And I think on my last point to you would be that is exactly what we've lost.
Mm,
We've lost the ability to accept criticism, give
mhm.
criticism, and nothing is open for debate anymore.
So true. Yeah, it's so true. And I've worked in a lot of companies where people talk about a fear of speaking up in their corporate culture. And you think, I mean, apart from the horrendous risk and compliance issues with that, but you think about how does that impact human connection,
Oh, yeah.
ability to debate, to understand, to empathize, to learn. If you can't speak up in a corporate culture, then you are just marching along like a little robot, collecting your paycheck and hoping to God that you retire soon.
Well, I mean, not all corporations are like this, but there are some out there that's
Mm,
all they want. But you
mm,
know what? I've seen a lot of people come out of corporate, go into small and medium and just even larger
yeah,
enterprises,
yeah,
and thrive
yeah,
because they found their tribe. They were in a place where they could actually, you know, be creative and
mm,
inclusive in terms of being able to give solutions and ideas. And
mhm.
isn't that really what we all want? We're all very extremely creative beings.
Absolutely. I mean, that's my story as well, and, there's many people's story. It's like done big corporate, can't bear to put it on that suit anymore, and go and be creative and challenge and be loud and sometimes make mistakes, but brush yourself off and learn from it and hang out
Absolutely.
with cool people like you and have
Are you
have
kidding?
great conversations.
Kat, I've failed more times in my life than I can actually even tell you, but it's because I'm not stuck on any set of principles. And I learn and I learn and I learn,
Mm,
Plus, I create my own rituals. I give myself freedom of exchange. I give myself freedom of being. And did I start like that when I came through my transition?
mm,
No,
mm,
but where my whole thing about diversity, inclusion, and truth comes from is you have to remember I lived 53 years of my life with a secret, and it was nothing more than the biggest lie ever.
wow.
And when people found out about my gigantic lie, they
Mm,
scattered like roaches when the light turned on, right? But how can you blame them? They had no idea that it was
mm,
a lie. They thought I was living integrally. And I
mm,
think a lot of corporations, in their defense, think that they're actually putting forward programs that are integral.
mm,
And
mm,
you have to go beyond the surface to really get something that's meaty, something that works. But
mm,
you're not hearing them talk about their failures. And I don't trust anybody that says they don't fail,
mm, mm.
right? Because if you're not willing to fail and try, sorry, you're
And
going to.
absolutely. And I love that topic of what do we not talk about? Because I think there is so much truth and so much power to create a difference in the untalked about, uncomfortable truths, even the personal one you shared. But in the corporate Australia at the moment, what do you think are some of the uncomfortable things we don't lean into and we don't talk about?
Look, it's really easy to see when what corporations are are wanting to have happen. So they have an aim, but unfortunately, they only put it out in words and it comes out very commercial, right?
Mm,
Bring your whole self to work
mm,
is something that if you took 10 pieces of corporate literature, one from each,
mhm.
corporation, and took the names off, you wouldn't be able to tell which corporation you were looking at
Absolutely.
because they're all using that type of a thinking. And it's just wrong. You can't just, change the words and expect people to just go, oh my God, that's incredible. Because you
Mm,
served up vanilla ice cream. Sorry.
mm, mm,
But I think some of the uncomfortable conversations are corporations wanting more of that corporate responsibility, understanding what it is, but they never ask the question. They always make these statements. But
mm,
again, you can take the name off of one company and put another one on it and be 100% accurate because they're
mm,
not having different conversations about what that truly means. For starters, take the word corporate off and just put the word social responsibility. Or
mm,
how about just corporate responsibilities, right? And if that's where we're actually looking at going, if we're looking at creating more corporate social responsibility, then I think it has to start inside. It's like charity starts at home.
mm,
You need to take care of yours better. Call them yours, make
mm,
them yours, and make you theirs.
mm,
It's a relationship at its very core,
mm,
and it's not a good relationship, right? So, but you know what? You can't just blame a corporation. You have to look at the people in the corporation and say, are they doing their best to make the corporation really look good? Or are they getting on social media and going, oh, such and such is such a son of a bitch?
mm,
You
mm,
So, sometimes we have to take the good with the bad.
mm,
But I see a lot of challenges around changing now. This will be an uncomfortable conversation. We've gotten in this far in diversity and inclusion. Now, what the hell do we do? How do
yeah.
we've got a manual this thick. How do we actually now take a step back and go, you know what, we need to pare it back?
Mm,
I'll tell you what, the first company that does that, I'm going to applaud them and
yep.
offer my services for free. I'll tell you, because it would be amazing that somebody else a corporation would say, you know what, we were wrong. And
Mm,
you know what, people, we actually need to be much more inclusive. We need to be freedom of being, freedom of exchange.
mm,
Let's have that conversation.
mm,
But we we don't actually know ourselves well, Kat. So when you've got a corporation that's got 1,000, 10,000 people,
mm,
you've really got a large body of people that really don't know themselves. They're not acting from their self. And
mm.
we're really, like I said earlier, really not involved in things that are profound
So
or
true.
that feel truthful. And one of the hardest conversations you can ever have is with yourself, to peel back the layers and say, what
Mm,
percentage of what I'm saying is truthful and what
mm,
percentage is, bold-faced lies.
mm,
And if we can't do that as individuals, how can we expect a corporation or even a smaller medium business
mm.
to pull back and do that? Because what you can do with an individual, you can do with a company, right?
Mm,
Because it's
mm.
all made up of people. So yeah, if we're not
That's
doing it as individuals, then we're probably not doing it at corporate level.
mm, mm. Well, that's right, because what is corporate Australia? It's a collection of people who have the moment in time to sit in the shoes of being the leaders, but they're the actors who are the face of the company. And if those individuals don't have freedom of being, if they're not really turning up and doing anything other than what they think the shareholders expect or somebody else expects, then you're not seeing that genuineness from there.
Yeah, and I think genuineness is a much better word, because authentic is, when you say you're authentic,
Mm,
it's like you said it in plaster.
yeah.
But when you're genuine, you're in flow, because genuine to me means that you're constantly learning, you're willing to change,
Mm,
you're willing to actually compromise left or right, to
mm,
actually stay on your path, stay on your
mm,
course. And
mm,
that's a tough decision to learn. But can I give you an example where I got the greatest amount of understanding of a personal conversation was in one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. So when I went to transition, people the transition was not bad in itself. I mean, I did end up getting sick, but the thing that made the transition so difficult
Mm,
was the conversations with people who loved my former self, John.
yeah.
The people that loved him, his identity, who he was, how he engaged them, they loved him. So when I had to have that conversation about moving forward with
Mm,
myself, it made it really, really difficult. That was a really difficult decision. Another time that I had really difficult conversations was I did the vagina monologues. Are you familiar with that?
yeah. Yeah.
So I got to play a role in that. And those conversations are so difficult.
Mm,
And even a lot of women do not like to listen to those conversations because it really highlights what thousands and thousands of women are actually going through. And if men would watch that, they would get a different idea about women. And if
mm,
women would watch that, they would get a different understanding of their strengths.
mm.
But we don't have that conversation. So I got to be around these 10 women, 9 women and myself for a little over 6 months. And all we did was after we did rehearse the scene, it got very somber.
Mm.
It got extremely emotional. And it was so powerful. To this day, out of my entire life, if there was something that actually had the most profound effect on me, it was that. Because
Wow.
I instantly said, I am not a woman.
Mm,
I live female, but I am not a woman. I never would have experienced anything like that in my entire life. And so I found it to be one of the edifices for anytime I can have an uncomfortable, conversation with someone, I do, because I tell people I'm not nice. I'm honest. I'm not vicious. I'm honest.
mm.
And am I 100% honest? Nobody is. That's not human.
But honesty is also seeking information, whether it's what you want to hear or not, because often people go seeking truth or information, but they're wanting to hear what they want. But what I'm hearing you articulate is an honesty, whereas you're willing to go in there, and there could be prickly stuff and there could be nice sweet stuff, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you can't just, it's not a conversation where you can just say that to someone. You can't just have an honest conversation.
Right.
You have to say, no, I've said it.
Mm,
What are we going to do about it?
yeah.
And that's how the point I would bring it back to corporation
Yeah.
because, at the executive level, I've got one set of goals, management, I've got another, and at the employee level, I've got a completely different level, right? But there are so many conversations that should be happening within those levels that would
Yeah.
totally transform the business, and executives would get their profitability out of it.
Yeah.
Management would be like, shoo, we've actually finally starting to come together because
Mm,
they've been forced to wear diversity and inclusion as their outcome, right?
absolutely.
And then you've got all the employees who've got all of the answers,
Mm, mm,
right? Because they're actually doing the work.
that's
And
right.
if you were to have those tough conversations, you'd find so many answers within a business. And I've never consulted to a business where that hasn't been true. The
Mm,
answers were always there anyway.
absolutely. We talked in March about the power of storytelling, and I remember, you talked about the fact that there were so many stories that don't get told, and or if they're not told, facts become myths and they become sort of stereotypes and taken out of context. And
Yeah.
I love that what we've brought into it is almost there's two layers. I think stories are incredibly important because they give people the bravery to understand that there's others out there and here's my perspective, but it's that one way giving of the perspective. And then what you've introduced as well is the difference and the next layer, which is a conversation, which is the we're going to do this together, we're going to tell two stories, my story, your story, and it's an exchange. And
Yeah.
it could get interesting because we might not agree, but let's listen and actually share two stories with each other. So do you think there's something in there that companies, well, life needs to be doing both storytelling to encourage others to speak, and to create a safety to speak and not be alone, but then have conversations where you're actually listening as well to understand.
Yeah, there's three things corporations should be doing: seeing people, hearing people, and
Mm,
acknowledging people. Those are the
mm,
three pillars that really open up conversations, right? Catch people doing right things, catch people doing something different than everyone else, and finding out why, and understanding that and acknowledging them, not because they're LGBTI or just a
mm,
woman, right? But because they're being human. How I tell my story now is how I went from male to female to human, because
mm,
that's what JJ actually represented, was that human element, that balance between, you know, how am I seeing people and how am I being seen, you know?
mm,
But
mm.
can I just mention, during this time since I've seen you last, I'm finishing up right now on a book called Fear into Confidence. And one of the things that I talk about in there is that, a lot of people say, oh, you have to be brave, but
Mm,
that's not true. You have to be brave, brave. And I'll tell you what I mean. We already are brave. We're willing to do things. We're not
mm,
afraid to do things. Most people are willing to try things, even say things.
mm,
We're afraid of the second brave. And that second brave is, what's going to be the outcome?
mm.
And most of the time, that's something we can't control, right? So we're not afraid to do it. We're afraid of the effect
True.
of actually doing it. So I say to people, look, if you actually want to get stronger, if you want to get better, if you want to be able to say something, you need to actually understand that you're not afraid to say it. You're afraid of what's going to be said back and in return, right? One of the
Mm,
7 gigantic fears that human beings actually still live after hundreds of years. And I think it's really important that, especially in a corporation, that they're doing that, because the number of conversations that they could have that could transform a business
oh, wow.
could be amazing,
Amazing.
right?
Yeah,
But then you'd have to
amazing.
get everybody to act brave, brave.
Brave, brave. I like it. In fact, it clarified so much for me because it's that moment where you have all these intelligent conversations in your head or that witty comment you wish you said to a person, but
Yeah,
you just never said it because it's the reaction that you weren't brave enough about.
exactly.
And
And that's the fear of the unknown.
mm, mm.
Yeah,
Well, and it's you taking on accountability somehow for how that other person reacts.
yeah.
You've owned that as well as the information that you wanted to give, which that's very limiting.
Yes, absolutely. And we have a tendency to answer uncertainty and effects with anger, right? Or we go into ourself and we go into anxiety or depression, which unfortunately is the ways that we've taught
Yeah.
people to fight,
Mm,
right? As you said earlier, those are the weapons, right?
mm,
If I know I can make somebody anxious or depressed, or
mm.
if I know that I can actually get them angry, right? That's not a win, but there's people out there who will act like that's a win.
Yeah.
And those are the people I do not mind punching in the face. Seriously, I mean, I know I wear skirts, but that doesn't mean I'm an idiot.
There are a lot of tough ladies out there, so
There
yeah,
are.
that skirt ain't any limitation to punching someone in the
Hike that
face.
puppy up and let's go.
All right, so I put a magic wand into your hand and you can fix one thing. What do you do?
So one thing, where am I fixing something?
Oh, well, you just expanded this to education, environment,
Yeah.
the various contributions. I
I would
guess,
wave the wand where I would always wave it. I only wave the wand in one direction, and that is towards the future generations.
mm,
Because what we actually have a tendency to forget is that everything that we do, every decision that we make, every decision we don't make, sounds like a Sting in the Police song, doesn't
yeah,
it? But everything that we do and don't do, everything that we damage,
mm,
right? Everything that we overturn, we're actually setting up our future generations to have to live with that. They don't have a choice. And I feel awful that we've actually taken that away from them. I've got a 3-year-old grandson,
mm,
and I just think the world he's going to grow up in, oh my God,
mm,
I it breaks my heart a little bit. So that is the only place that I would actually be pointing my wand is to get people to actually be a little bit more conscious of future generations.
Mm. It's so true. If people turned and looked back at a younger person and said, "Hey, are you okay that I'm going to do this, but you'll never see glaciers, or you will never see this particular animal in the wild." But this is going to bring a lot of economic prosperity. If you had to have that conversation
Yeah.
and hear the answer, it'd be a pretty different sort of outcome, I suspect.
Well, the commercial answer to that is, well, they've got pictures,
Yeah.
you know, and
Mm,
it's when my magic wand would turn towards bringing back a Tyrannosaurus Rex to eat them.
mm, mm,
Because I find that to be the most difficult conversation, is not considering what's going to go forward. And
mm,
I know a lot of people don't like that girl Greta, but I have to tell you, I was astounded by the truths that she said. Now,
mm,
were they all 100% hers? I don't know. But I agreed with the concept, and I wish more millennials
mm,
actually stood forward on a lot of the issues. I think it'd be amazing. If you
mm,
had a debate between a group of corporates and a group of millennials,
mm.
I think millennials would take them apart.
Absolutely. There's such a strong assumption that age and wisdom go hand in hand, and that's the only place that we can make decisions from. But imagine if we had somebody even just asking questions and interrogating and probing and critical thinking to
Yeah.
say, "Are you sure that that's the truth? Are you sure that that's accurate?" They mightn't even need to have the answers, but just to even ask why, like the kids ask why all the time, like your
Yeah,
grandson. How
absolutely.
awesome is the word why? Why do you think that's right? Why do you think that's okay?
I don't know about wisdom and getting old, because even stupid people get old, so, and procreate, unfortunately. So,
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a whole nother chat in that, isn't there?
oh my God, that's a chat for a bottle of wine.
That is. All right. Well, I'm hanging out for that bottle of wine with you, my friend. I would
Good
love for that
deal.
day to come very, very quickly. I am so appreciative of your time.
Very
I receive it with gratitude, as will all everyone who listens to this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really
And
enjoyed that conversation.
oh, me too. Thank you so much, and all the best for the rest of this year. And let's hope that next year has a little bit more of the smarts about it.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, Kat, thank you so much.
Thanks, JJ.
Bye.
Bye.